If you ask most people what animal they're most afraid of, you'll usually hear about sharks, bears, snakes, or spiders. It's estimated that up to a third of all people have a mild fear or a deep discomfort when encountering spiders. It's very common. And it makes sense. Nature has spent millions of years designing many creatures to look like the perfect predator. But if we're talking about actual risk, meaning the numbers of who's actively taking the most human lives on Earth, the real apex predator of our planet doesn't have claws, fangs, or a movie franchise. It's a tiny, fragile insect that weighs less than a single drop of water, the mosquito. So, how does a creature so small manage to outkill every apex predator on Earth combined? Today, we're breaking down the entire mosquito case file. We'll look at what makes mosquitoes so dangerous and exactly how they kill humans. But we'll also explore why we can't just wipe them off Earth, no matter how annoying the buzzing in your ear and the itchy bites may be. If we look at numbers, it can be generally estimated that each year, global fatalities from sharks hover around 6. Bears account for about 20, and spiders account for about 50. But the humble mosquito is responsible for roughly 760,000 human deaths every single year. That makes it statistically more dangerous than human on human violence and war. War. Although these global estimations of total human deaths per species differ between sources, all sources agree that mosquitoes claim the most human lives. They also agree that any second up runner species for most humans killed has less than a fraction of the deaths that mosquitoes do. Now, not many people feel very fond of mosquitoes. None of us like being bitten and itchy, along with being harassed by their constant buzzing, but I don't think people realize that they're more than occasionally annoying, they're also human serial killers. Although those numbers may have just scared you, hear me out before you start screaming and running away from every mosquito you see. First of all, this large death count is not spread evenly throughout the world. Hot, humid, and less developed countries carry a large number of these deaths, a majority being of children under 5 years old. And out of 3,500 mosquito species on Earth, only about 15% actively bite humans, and of those 15%, just a handful are capable of carrying the viruses that make us sick, which kill us. Most mosquitoes are harmless vegetarians that feed on plant nectar or target birds and reptiles. But let's meet the three villains of the mosquito world, whose names are on screen because I will butcher their pronunciation. Our first genus is a night owl, easily identified by its molded wings and a bizarre, highly athletic feeding posture where it points its tail up at a 45-degree angle while drinking. This group of mosquitoes are the exclusive carriers of malaria, the parasite responsible for the vast majority of mosquito-related deaths. Next is the daytime tiger mosquito, sporting high contrast black and white stripes. It bites parallel to the skin and carries dengue, Zika, and yellow fever. Lastly is your standard backyard pest, active during twilight and responsible for the West Nile virus. As a really interesting side note, male mosquitoes are completely harmless vegetarians who live exclusively on flower nectar. Only female mosquitoes bite. And female mosquitoes don't drink blood as a source of food, contrary to popular belief, but they use our blood to acquire proteins and iron in order to produce their eggs, which is why only the females need blood. In order to get our blood, female mosquitoes use 6 specialized needles. While 2 needles saw through the skin, she injects saliva containing a cocktail of anticoagulants to keep your blood flowing, and a mild anesthetic in yet another needle hoping that you don't feel the bite. The itchy red bump left behind isn't from the bite itself, but it's just your immune system throwing sort of a localized tantrum over those foreign salivary proteins. If you do happen to get bit and want to be super cautious, the best thing you can do is avoid the urge to itch the bite. Itching the area breaks the skin, allowing more bacteria to enter. Instead, try to use an ice pack or those anti-itch sprays to neutralize it. For the vast majority of people, this bump will disappear in a few days, and in the following 2-week period, you should only contact a healthcare provider if you develop a high fever, severe headache, confusion, joint pain, or a sudden rash. But that being said, I don't want anybody to leave this video panicking every time they get a mosquito bite. Our bodies are actually very good at fighting these viruses. So even if you do get bitten by a mosquito carrying a virus, it's very likely that you will experience no symptoms or mild flu-like symptoms and recover quickly. The threat of mosquitoes has a pretty long history. If we look at the historical trajectory of malaria, it tells us that it's not an unstoppable virus, but one that's highly linked to resources. Malaria was once very common in both the US and Europe, but once aggressive swamp drainages started and economic development picked up, wealthy nations managed to wipe it out by the mid 20th century. Today, 9 out of 10 malaria cases are concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, where humid climates and a lack of resources keep this cycle going. This setup raises a question, or at least it did for me. If these viruses are so destructive to us, why don't they make the mosquitoes sick and also kill them? The answer is basically that mosquitoes have negotiated with the viruses and created an evolutionary compromise of sorts. When a virus infects a human cell, it hijacks the machinery to create a bunch of viral proteins until the cell literally bursts. However, in a mosquito, a process called translational repression is enforced. The virus is allowed to accumulate its genetic material, but the cell keeps a tight grip on the amount produced. Simultaneously, the mosquito's immune system deploys specialized small RNA molecules called piRNAs, assisted by other proteins to snip the viral's RNA into smaller, harmless fragments. That may sound complicated, but that's basically all just to say that the mosquito stays unharmed and the virus agrees not to hurt the mosquito in trade for a free ride. The viruses are happy with this setup because even though they can't do much within the mosquito, they can stay active and hop a free ride to humans where they can then further spread and replicate. Apart from their negotiation with viruses, mosquitoes are also such good virus carriers because they have an open circulatory system. Unlike us humans who have a closed loop of blood vessels, this just means that once a virus escapes their gut, it freely bathes the entire body cavity, giving the virus free rein to travel anywhere, and therefore travel into their salivary glands with almost no barriers to stop it. This is how mosquitoes transmit viruses so easily, because the virus can travel quickly to its saliva and therefore travel to us humans when we're bitten. Because mosquitoes are such a menace, it's tempting to curse at them and think that we should just erase them from the face of Earth. I mean, it's really not uncommon for someone to ask why mosquitoes exist and why we can't just kill them. Now, I'm not really a fan of mosquitoes either, but let's just remember that only 15% of mosquitoes are harmful, and that ecosystems are very delicate. In the cold forests of the northern hemisphere, mosquitoes are actually the primary pollinators of the blunt-leaf orchid. And in the Arctic tundra, swarms of 17 trillion mosquitoes act as an organic traffic control system for caribou herds. Relentless insect harassment forces the herds to windswept highlands and coasts, preventing them from overgrazing and destroying the vegetation in the lowlands. Eradicating them could trigger unforeseen ecological collapses or a phenomenon called competitive release, where an empty niche is filled by a pest that's even worse. I'm sure you've all heard about like the Save the Bees movement, but hey, mosquitoes are also pollinators, and pollinators are super important for the lives of vegetation, which is important for the lives of the prey who eat the vegetation, and therefore also important for the predators that eat the prey, and so on. Basically, I'm saying that even though they're just bugs, each species has a role to play in the food pyramid, and a disruption of that could hurt the animals all the way up the chain. However, scientists do agree that the number of human deaths caused by this small percentage of mosquitoes is not so great. So, in terms of solutions, biotech companies have a few that they're currently deploying to control infectious mosquito populations. Various companies are at work here, but the majority use similar ideas. One of which works by infecting male mosquitoes with a naturally occurring bacterium. Since male mosquitoes don't bite, they are released into the wild with uninfected females. Thanks to cellular incompatibility between these modified males and the natural females, the resulting eggs completely fail to hatch, collapsing the population without using any man-made chemicals. Similarly, the second option also works by releasing modified males. However, they're modified genetically instead. The males are made to carry a gene that prevents the female offspring from surviving past the larval stage. This allows the harmless males to survive while removing the biting females. So, to summarize, most current strategies modify the males in some way, so that the female's ability to give birth is affected, and the population numbers hopefully dwindle. But although we do hold the ability to edit an entire species in order to save human lives, it requires a lot of thinking about ecological ethics and unintended consequences. It is possible for us to wipe out these mosquitoes, but it's extremely hard to predict what consequences that will carry on for other species and the environment. It's also ethically questionable for obvious reasons, like, is it really correct for us to kill a species that's just doing what it can to survive? When we look at the big picture here, the mosquito problem isn't really a global mystery, it's a resource challenge. The biology of the mosquito is the same everywhere, but the devastation it causes is completely dictated by geography and infrastructure. Thank you so much for watching. I honestly made this entire video because I randomly googled what animal kills the most humans, and it surprised me so much that I decided to research it. I really hope you learned something and found it as interesting as I did. Thank you.